haere mai, and welcome to Cult Chat, the podcast where we talk about coercion, control, and all things cultish. I'm Dr. Caroline Ansley. I'm a medical doctor. As a child, I lived at the Centrepoint community, a notorious cult in New Zealand, and now I run a website that advocates for the former children of the community.
I'm Liz Gregory, and I run the Gloriavale Leavers Support Trust, and I'm privileged to walk alongside people after leaving this group as they embark on their new lives.
And I'm Lindy Jacob. I'm a former member of the Exclusive Brethren, and I'm part of the Olive Leaf Network, a new initiative in Aotearoa to support leavers of high-demand religious groups. Come with us as we unpack the cult playbook. We'll be talking to experts and leavers of coercively controlling groups, and we will call for Kiwis to cult-proof their lives.
Come with us as we traverse the cultiverse.
A warning, this podcast contains references to subjects and discussions which may be difficult for some people to hear. Please take care of yourselves and your whānau when listening.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to Cult Chat. It's great to have you here today, and what a treat to be in the Plains Media studio. Now, you'll be aware that we are just partway through an interview that we've had with Veronica and Lindsay, and these are two women from New Zealand who've been speaking out about their experiences in the 2x2 group, otherwise known as the Truth or the Way or the Church with no name. And so we're going to just continue to listen for another 20 minutes to the interview with these ladies, and then we're going to come back and have a discussion. Make sure that if you haven't heard part one of this episode, that you head back there now, catch up on what we've been talking about, and then join us again for this part two.
Because the workers don't have any theology training, you're just in this echo chamber of people's interpretation, and also a twisted interpretation because it's an interpretation that enables control. Mm-hmm. And it's really interesting looking at stories that have gone back and forth over the years and that have evolved. You know, there's all of these like real practical, almost parables shared about, you know, this person didn't profess that evening, so they left the meeting and there was a car crash and they died.
Oh yes, those ones.
Those ones. Or, you know, this worker went home because there were ants in the gym because that was the last straw and he died, you know. Or there's all of these stories about things that are either causing fear or about that the workers would bring back from a country that they were visiting. There's a lot of workers who go out and go to like China or go to, I know there's a few in Fiji at the moment, and there's like, they go to these places and they preach and they like try and reach out to families and convert them. Yeah. So, but that's only overseas that they're doing that.
Yeah,
work.
yes.
There's a lot of that going on here.
And so they glamorize it. They come back and talk about those issues, I'm guessing. Yeah, so what about a woman who, let's say, does secretly read her Bible and does have some interest in this theology, the study of God? After all, they're professing to know and love God. What would a woman do to resist? What would resistance look like? A woman who actually holds a different opinion, wants to have a good tussle over a Bible verse because what she's reading and what's being presented aren't lining up. What options are there?
She's a troublemaker. A real slippery slope would be to join an actual Bible study group.
Yeah.
It would be like
Gloriavale.
The start of the end.
Yeah, they got banned. There were some people meeting together having Bible studies and pre-meetings, and all the leaders put an end to that one.
Yeah. So I remember my youngest was, my second was about 2, and I managed to get away to a Wednesday night meeting, and that happened to be with one of New Zealand's most notorious 2x2 pedophiles. And so he got up, rattled on, blah, 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 blah. Next person rattled on, and you're only allowed to study like a very small portion of the Bible, and you regurgitate your thoughts on this.
Oh yes,
which are literally just your thoughts because you don't have any other theology.
And of course, they're actually your thoughts that you came up with all by yourself, or maybe they were the thoughts of the culture, the indoctrination from childhood, but they're your thoughts. Especially.
Yeah, and so you go around the circle and you'd be like, oh, my thoughts have already been expressed, but, and then you would add your tiny little, glittery version of it, and then the next person and so on and so forth. And I went home and I was just like, this is not a Bible study. And so my son is turning 17, so we're talking 15 years ago. I was like, this is not a Bible study. Nobody asks questions. There's no discussion. Everybody repeats everything, and it feels empty. And I pretty much stopped going then because it just felt like flogging a dead horse. I got no spiritual bread from it, and I wasn't able to ask questions. And the thought of a woman, a young mum, piping up and saying afterwards, hey, maybe we could talk more about this. And that was a weird dichotomy. We were so spiritually minded. It was the highest thing in our lives. But outside of the meetings, you try and get a 2x2 engaged in really meaningful Bible discussion. And it's like, ooh, wow.
And they call that the spirit. If it's outside of their doctrine or the kind of echo chamber that they're in and it doesn't feel comfortable, then it's the wrong spirit.
Yes.
So if you were to speak on a verse and like bring up something, just a little bit different. I remember saying something when I was younger, like, well, like, I guess Christianity is just about love, really, isn't it? And somebody being like, no. And me being like, well, we just read, Corinthians, and like, that's what I was thinking that meant. But obviously, I have the wrong interpretation. So then having to like figure out in my head why my interpretation didn't match. And let me just share with you that I professed at 7. So that meant that I needed to be preparing something to speak on in the meeting at 7 years old.
Oh, so everybody speaks in a meeting, or
everybody that has professed?
Everyone that's professed there's an expectation of speaking. Are you sitting in a circle?
Yeah.
And you pass a microphone around?
No, you just start when you feel, yeah. So there's a kind of set order, like you sing a hymn, you pray, you sing a hymn, people speak, and the elder or the worker presiding closes that. And then if it's Sunday, you have the emblems and then close in a hymn. If it's Wednesday night, you just close in a hymn. And there's a set study for Wednesday nights where Sunday is more like sharing your thoughts or kind of convictions from the week. But it's like, it's often self-deprecating too. It's like about how you could have done better or been better, or, things that you find as a struggle, or like, it's just constantly tearing yourself apart. And so 7 years
I'm
old,
fascinated that women could speak, because again, obviously my context where women, there's no way they were allowed to share their thoughts at all. So if I'm hearing you right, you're saying that women could share and were even expected to share, but going back to what Veronica said earlier, that you still had to again share within only the kind of acceptable norms of what was the right thing to contribute. You weren't really allowed genuinely free questions or
it's like there were all of these like terms that they would use, like your little part or my small place or my
your wee contribution.
How fascinating.
Yeah. Very like infantilized. Your contribution is quite infantilized as a woman, like, because a man would close the meeting unless a sister worker was there, and if a brother worker, like, the man is still at the top.
Yeah.
Right. The overseer is still at the top and brother workers are still at the top. It's just how they are represented in the meeting. Like, like the elder would be a representative of the workers, or the sister worker would be a representative of the brother workers, who are a representative of the overseer, who I heard a brother worker say, and I kid you not, on a Zoom call where I was trying to advocate for change, that the overseer, it was a brother worker who was like in his 70s, said, well, the overseer is like 1,000 times more godly than I am.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, are you kidding? Like, because this was after we'd left. Are you kidding me? Like, for real, you believe that man who's done all of these things is 1,000 times more godly than you?
Well,
I have, yeah.
In their system, he was called by God to be a worker, and what more can you say? Look, Lindy, in Gloria Vale, the women are allowed to speak in the meetings as well. They stand up and share. And when we went there for
even thoughts on spiritual stuff.
Yes, when we went to the Gloria Vale meeting, one of the women stood up and she talked about how, she forsook her family, her children, and she had to cut them off. But when she goes to heaven, she'll be welcomed, good and faithful servant. And I just felt like crying with pain for this woman. But you're right, it's still only within the acceptable norms of what they're allowed to speak, but same sort of concept. But yeah, the women there are actually allowed to speak. Are we able to segue and look a little bit about just emotional suppression? Because you've talked about, sort of the abuse and then woman feeling victim and blamed. Is there a general emotional suppression, or are you allowed to experience different types of emotions?
I think that varied according to the culture that the 2x2, like the country, I think had a flavor on that, is my opinion. But so my lived experience is that emotions, or showing emotions, is a little bit like showing doubt or asking a question, in that it's an indication of too little faith. And if you were really in the will of God and really happy, and you should be happy, that's another thing that came up, was that you should be happy. We are the happiest people on earth.
That's funny.
And for some weird reason, lots of women cry every Sunday morning when they give their testimony. They're so happy that they can never be good enough and everyone else is better than them, and they can't, be as spiritual as they should, or they didn't read, and it, the suppression of emotions in the meeting carries a little, I think it's called a baby fundy voice, and once you hear it, you can't unhear it. And so I'm just here to give my testimony, and I didn't have time to read and pray, and I really want to do better next week, and
Yeah.
And so my kids would sit in the meeting and just be like, these people never cry or talk like this in real life, and yet we come once a week and we listen to these people in our lives, our relatives and friends, speak in a very weird voice about things that they never talk about outside meetings. And so my kids were just like, this is weird.
Fascinating.
The baby fundy voice is seen as having the spirit, though, right? Like,
yes.
That's like you're so humbled, and like, it's like this. And there is a cadence. Ted Harris does an amazing impression on his YouTube channel. He's to the point that he's fooled people into thinking it is a worker online preaching, but he's just being sarcastic the whole time. Wow. But if you want a good representation of what that sounds like to listen to a worker, but like with some tongue-in-cheek comments, Ted Harris's is it the Millstone YouTube channel?
Yeah.
Is like, it's a really, really good example. Like, because sitting there, you're like, it actually is almost triggering.
It is. It's some days I can't listen to it, because to me it means emotional suppression, because when you talk in that voice, you are suppressing what you really feel, and you're putting in something about the Bible that you read. Or I found out people weren't reading their Bibles, and they were going to the meeting and making things up, and I stressed so hard to have something to say in that meeting.
It's just, it's really interesting, and we've just got a few more minutes together, so I thought it might be appropriate just to talk about the role of women in friendship. Like, were you living in isolated your own family group, or was there a true friendship network, or was it more the critical? How do you look at that now?
For me, it was conditional female friendships. And so as soon as my status in the church changed from any to out, like, I'm worse than an outsider who's never met the gospel, because I was born fourth generation into this, and then I chose to leave. So that's really bad. And so those friendships, there's a few that have been really sweet, but for the most part, you're friends with them because you're in the same place at the same time, and you have the commonality in that you have the same beliefs. But since having to be fully immersed in the corporate world for 7 years now, and not just be a farmer's wife, I've learned that friendships can be amazing and unconditional. And it wasn't really until I tasted unconditional friendship that I realized that so many of the friendships, the female friendships and the 2x2s, are so conditional. And that's sad. Like, we're here for real connection, and you shouldn't cease having social interactions with someone because their behavior doesn't align with the male elder's ideals. It's
definitely. And I think, like, as a child, like, we were isolated geographically. My dad trained to be a pilot and then couldn't do it because they asked him and my mom to be on the grounds until they found a family that was suitable.
Oh, you weren't considered suitable, your family?
No, well, clearly not, because we've all left. But yeah, that's the words that they used with them, and we were very much seen as not quite good enough to be on the convention grounds. That's kind of a royalty position, and we were not 2x2 royalty. I remember people being like, "Oh, you're so, such a privilege to be on the grounds, and you must love spending all the time with the workers." And my dad saying, "We must just be here because we need extra help because I don't feel like that." Like he would say to us, like, "I don't feel like that," and we were looked down on a lot financially. I know, like one of the overseers wanted to look into my family's finances because he was worried that we didn't have enough money to be in the position that we were in. That was one of the kind of rumors going around. And yeah, there's a lot of conditional friendship, and like there's different kind of there's social groups within the group, but we were geographically isolated. So convention would come around, and you'd have a few people that hung out with you, and then you're alone for the rest of the year.
Yeah, that is. That's difficult. To not be able to fall back on a really grounded social network, and a lot of people leaving cults feel incredibly isolated on leaving because they're losing all that. But if you've already had the isolation, it's just an extra barrier when you come out, learning how to make friendships that might last.
And the friendships that you do have, like looking back, I remember being in homes and thinking back now, seeing hallmarks of abuse that I wouldn't have known then. So there's little things that come back that you just accepted as normal. Yeah, it's interesting looking back at those relationships and seeing how quickly people drop you when you leave.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So do you regret leaving?
Not a single day. Not a single minute of any single day.
I think it's especially like the freedom of watching our daughter grow up.
Absolutely. My kids thank me often for leaving.
Wow.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you're in, they say people only leave for, either they stop praying or they stop loving God, or like that they'll come back, they'll come back because this is where they'll want to be. But there's no part of me that wants to go back. I can see how people do end up back in if you have your family trying to coerce you, if you have, but I'm very lucky that even up to my grandparents' generation, I still have all 4 grandparents alive, and they all left. My sister doesn't lie, and they knew that what she said was not, like that she was not lying, and what she said was happening, and they were, one of her abusers was my grandfather's sister. Like that's a big thing for him to accept. And women in these groups, the only way, how did she put it? She said, the only way to survive as a sister worker is either you conform to the culture or you burn yourself out or you die, basically. Like that's all there is.
It's called dying in the yoke.
Die with your nose to the grindstone.
And you will become an abuser in a system like this. You will become complicit or an abuser because the system turns you into that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it is heartbreaking, isn't it? And so a lot of people have left. I know the 2x2's. What's that like for you when you hear that someone you grew up with has left the 2x2's? How's that?
It's such a boost, and I immediately get in contact with them because I know they're going to be hurting and they're going to be confused and feeling isolated, and you just feel like no one knows what you're going through. And so I joined one of the Facebook groups when I left, and a family connection reached out to me, and she was like, I know how you feel. This is what helped. Here's some people you can talk to. And that for me was amazing. So I help another 2x2 leaving support group. And I wish I had more time for it because it's incredibly rewarding. And Tristan's been a big part of, a lot of our healing journeys in helping connect us. And then we met up at Decult.
Yeah.
And look at you, you're a remarkable woman. You're speaking up, and they would probably say you're bleating. You're actually making too much noise, you stroppy woman. But as we just sort of come into the ending here, is there anything else you'd like to share, or another reflection just while you have people listening, and there's a nice platform here, and you're welcome to talk.
It's amazing on the outside. I'd like to say that there's no lightning strikes, no car crashes, there's no random workers turning up at your home. You don't have to hide your TV. I own a TV. I bought my first TV 3 weeks ago with my partner, and yeah, I'm still geeking out about it. But it's not about the material side of things. There is an enormous freedom to discover who you are. And we're going to be speaking to people of varying different belief systems. But if you, still have that relationship with God, you are a child of God. You're supposed to have thoughts, opinions, feelings, express yourself. That's not bad. And I would say if anyone's, listening to this and thinking of their own life choices, something that really helped me was, do I want my children to profess? Do I want my children to have workers in their home? Do I want them to live under these rules? And if not, who's going to break that cycle? So I'm out. My 3 brothers are out. My dad's out. My mum passed away 7 years ago, and I know for certain that she would be as well. And I was basically staying because of her connection. So yeah, everyone's got their own journey. It's amazing out here. And I wish anyone who is about to leaving, has recently left, all the very best, because it is a difficult process, but it is very, very worth it. Yeah.
Well,
And I guess what I would add to that is that, like, I think it's normal coming out of things like this too. I guess one thing I've kind of struggled with is like questioning lots of things and going through periods of time where like I don't like having that I don't actually know feeling and not feeling like something's going to hit you or you're going to die and go to hell because you are just you've been spiritually abused. So like it's a natural and that's one thing that also has kind of hit me is coming out like in multiple cultures. And like if you think about Maori culture and like Te Whare Tapawha, spirituality spans humanity. Like everywhere we are, people have an understanding of how we've come to be. And a lot of what underlines that is being a good person. And so I just try and be kind and like going through periods of not knowing which way is up is okay. I think it's really normal for people to go through that. And I guess that's kind of where I am at the moment. Like there's some days where I think something and then some days when I think something else, but forgiving myself for that and not being like, you are a horrible person because this is the way that you feel. Just going, I have been spiritually abused. So this is something I need to work through until I get to the point where I feel really sure in who I am. And I like, it's hard when people speak poorly of you and it's hard not to take that on board, but just to give yourself time and space before you jump into anything else. Like cult hopping is a thing. So just give yourself the space to breathe before you grab a hold of, someone else's beliefs or someone else's narrative on how things should be. Just give yourself space to heal.
Nice.
Absolutely. I really want to come at life at the moment from a place of tenderness and love and concern and care. But what I'm really struggling with is that love is in action, and love sometimes looks like flipping tables and taking a whip and driving the baddies out. And when you're raised that anger is bad and that love looks like never rocking the boat, it's really hard. But this is my loving. I don't want people to suffer anymore, and love is an action. It's not just staying at home, reading a Bible and praying. It's an action. And so things will not change unless we take action. So I am here to help anyone that needs help. And I'm here to raise other people's voices that don't, have the courage yet to speak. And eventually, I'm studying digital marketing to tell other people's stories so that more people can stand up and say, no, we're not okay for this for us, and we're not okay for this for our children, and no one after that should have to suffer because of this.
Oh, amazing. Coming to you soon then. I see a 2x2 podcast. It's, the Exclusive Brethren have got their Get a Life one. It's gone right through the globe, and I there's a place for the 2x2's. They've got enough reach into other countries and enough people that have left to certainly tell a collection of stories. And I think what you'd find is there would be so many similarities, even though it was intercontinental.
I guess at the end of it all, there's still children out there in this group and who are being exposed to this stuff because people haven't, I guess you're encouraged not to look at information. So like we have to look out for that next generation. And I think what you said, like the flipping tables, like this is what I can do with my time. And and it can be all consuming. You have to be careful of that. But yeah, there's kids out there that will be subject to sexual abuse. It's not if, it's when. The system. So, you look at these little kids that you cared about, your friends' kids, or like they're taking them to these meetings, they're leaving them in rooms with workers around to hang out, like these people are in their homes at nighttime. They go to meetings where there's known predators that are there. Yeah. And we have to act. There's not an option.
I agree.
Yeah, thank you, Lindsay and Veronica. Powerful words, powerful calls to action, and powerful calls to take your own really, really hard experiences and to yet not just secure your own kind of freedom and a better pathway forward for yourselves or your children, but to also keep fighting for those who are still in there. And that, Veronica, as you said, that's actually coming from a place of love. It's not coming from a place of bitterness or vengeance or anything, that it's coming from a place of deep care and love, and wanting people to experience a more healthy spirituality and a more healthy sense of community and safety. So yeah, what a call to action. Thank you both so much for coming on tonight. It takes such a lot of courage, especially the first time coming publicly online and sharing your stories, and just mad respect for you both, and wishing you both all the best for your journey as it continues to unfold. And I hope that we'll have many more conversations with you, maybe on the air, but also personally as well, as we all continue this kind of mahi. So yeah, wonderful to hear from you both, and we look forward to hearing from you again.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks, everyone. Well, ladies, good to have you back here again. What an interesting, episode and a half we've had, listening to Veronica and Lindsay's experiences of being a woman inside the 2x2's. How's that been sitting with you?
It has been sitting. It's been sitting with me as I've been considering what it feels like to be a woman in this particular environment. This is really quite different for me. I have less of an experience with this sort of
conservative Christian
and pervasive, minimize. I'm trying to struggle with the words here to describe the kind of pervasive suppression or reduction in a woman's experience. I didn't experience myself in any kind of way, so this is I'm trying to get my head around it.
When you say you didn't experience it yourself, are you referring to your centre point time? And is
Yes.
that because you're a child rather than that it wasn't there? Because I
suspect it was there to a degree, but not like this, in a very different way.
Right.
Yeah, so that's what I'm trying to grapple my head with. And I'm thinking quite a bit about how, I think it was Lindsay that talked about, she said there were these terms that they would use, like your little part or my small place or my wee contribution. And she said very much your contribution is infantilized as a woman. And that's kind of what I'm sort of thinking of, this sort of constant sort of pervasive reduction of what it means to be a woman. And I guess it's more than a reduction, it's a compression into a certain shape.
And even though it looks like inside this group there were some things that were surprising there, Lindy, you brought it up a couple of times and I referenced it as well, just the difference between this sort of patriarchal, conservative, Christian fundamental group and others like Exclusive Brethren and Gloria Vale. And you have variations in those groups of how women are allowed to contribute in the service.
Yes, and they were allowed to speak.
And yet they would call
they had to speak.
They had to, if they'd been,
which from my perspective, I was like, oh wow, that's progressive. They were allowed to speak.
But the Gloria Vale woman spoke as well. They would share their testimony and encourage people.
Right.
And so
that was when they said to me, no, yes, they're allowed to speak, but it was still very much like a certain script that you had to say or within a certain box. Like, that it wasn't really free and full participation. And she talked about, Veronica talked about how at one point she did really want to ask a bunch of questions and to dig into the theology and unpack some of the scriptural teachings about some things. But she knew that asking questions in that way with sort of full authenticity of what was going on for her, like, would be frowned upon, that it wasn't her place as a young woman and a mother of young children to be going there. So that was interesting for me because it reminds me there's a meme kicking around somewhere. I can't remember who it's by. I should see if we can find it for the show notes. But it's such a great one because it says like, it's got like a guru or a leader saying like, of course you can ask questions. Here is the list of approved questions that you may ask. Of course you can contribute. Here is a list of the exact things you're allowed to say. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that perfectly sums it up, right? Like, yeah, that's pretty much what she's saying was their experience.
Asking questions is your one-way ticket out of a high control group. Like literally, they will throw you out. Or if you've got an inquiring mind, you will end up yourself disconnecting from the group.
So what do you think is the purpose of giving women that apparent progressive position in an environment which is so patriarchal that really rams women into a certain shape and size? What is the purpose of giving them a little space? What does that do? I mean, they certainly can't be who they are. They certainly don't get a lot of respect and autonomy, and they don't get to influence the direction of the culture. But they get to show up in this little prescribed way.
But they are the mothers. So children are looking and seeing an example that this is a place and a space where, you know, there is a place for everyone in this family who is growing up. But don't forget, they were actually more than that. They weren't just allowed to contribute. They were allowed to be workers.
And that was the other fascinating piece.
I think, though, that they could say and would say that there's scriptural precedent for it. You've got the deacon concept where Phoebe, female deacon in the Bible. So it wasn't that there weren't roles for women, there were. And so
for just to recap for our listeners who might not be familiar, a worker is a capital W, it's a title. And in the 2x2's, they have male and female workers. And the Veronica and Lindsay were describing to us that a worker is seen as having quite a lot of respect and spiritual authority, even if it's a female, right? So, and it's kind of like a missionary. It was someone who remained unmarried and celibate in theory, and who had to like travel around doing work for the kingdom of God or whatever, and staying in houses. So yeah, I found that fascinating that they allowed women that privileged role, because certainly in the Brethren there wouldn't be anything like that. It was pretty much just be married and no other option. But okay, so they were allowed workers.
Yeah.
But do you remember her comment? Which one of them? I can't remember who it was. Who talked about the birds on the on the line, the birds sitting on the power line, and how the birds above were pooing on the heads of the one next down, and they were pooing.
So she was saying that even the female workers sit under unmarried men, and
they were just under the male workers.
They were under the male workers, but they were more than a man.
In a meeting, if you're in a male's home and like a male elder, he would open the meeting effectively, and then she would kind of take the meeting.
Right. Yeah. So they were allowed to participate, but it was still seen as needing to be under this kind of male covering, like this kind of male spiritual covering or authority.
Yeah. And what's interesting is not what goes on necessarily inside the church service on a Sunday, because you have great variety across all sorts of the Christian spectrum within that particular issue. But it doesn't mean it has to extend into the areas of your life and your marriage and everything else. But inside these high control groups, their reach is more expensive. Now, we know that the 2x2's there's quite a bit of variety, I think, internationally with 2x2's and the rules, because there's no rules, of course. There's no really great big structure, apparently. Okay. And then you've got variations across different groups, even like across New Zealand. So they'll say, oh, well, we were in a group that was a little more liberal or looser. Ours wasn't quite as strict as that. So there is quite a bit of variation. But I was interested in the woman's experience when it came to that inner sense of worth and self. And she made a couple of comments. Was Veronica talking about her contribution to the life of the church. And she said it was never enough. And she said, as a woman, so much of your worth is tied up to your role in the church. And just, it's the ideas of sacrifice, of expectations placed on women inside high controlling groups. It's a lot higher than inside just your average, Christian expression and faith community.
In mainstream Christianity, or for women who are not part of church communities.
Yeah.
So and it sounded like there was a crushing pressure and crushing expectation.
And that is what I hear those in Gloriavale, the crushing expectation to be seen as like the perfect wife, the perfect church member, the perfect mother, everything you did. So you're then beginning to look at how someone's worth is tied up in their deeds, what they're doing. And that's where you get groups like Gloriavale. They want to put on a good view for the outside public, but really internally there's just a wasting away. And so that's where you've got loss of autonomy coming in, suppression. There's just so many features that can just coalesce together. And when you think about a woman carrying that, it's like a burden. They carry a burden. And women in high control groups carry very heavy burdens.
Meanwhile, another role that should be carried by women can't be, and that's the role of the protector. You know, I think of a powerful female image I have is of the lioness with her cubs. She's gone out doing all the work and she's caring and nurturing and protecting her infants. And what this narrow view of womanhood, with all of the heavy layers and layers and layers of expectation, fit into this box and do a really remarkable, amazing, perfect job of it, is the complete distraction from that protection role. And I think in the role of protection, I think of righteous anger and indignation, the power of a woman being like deeply in her power to do what she can do. And I think about the 2x2's and what our guests, Lindsay and Veronica, described. In the background is also this extraordinary harm that's happening to the children. For generations and generations, the sexual abuse of the children, 5 generations or so. And the woman being unable to protect their children in that. And the harm that comes from that gap.
And I'm recalling a conversation a week ago with a woman who left Gloriavale with a lot of children. And she said, I've been reflecting on my experience as a woman in Gloriavale. And she said, I've been out a few years, but it's taking me a long time to process. But I've realised I've caused great harm to my children. And she said, but I thought I was like the best mother in there. I was the best mother. But she said, I realise now I actually caused harm to my kids. And she said, I've gone to them. I'm apologising to them that I caused harm doing what I thought was.
Oh, that's so painful. But like, that's very courageous of her to actually admit that. Like, that takes a huge amount of humility and vulnerability and courage.
Yeah. She knows her sisters and her family members still in Gloriavale. They think they're doing the best they can for their kids. But she just said you just don't have the reflection to hindsight.
And you don't have the space to even consider the role of parenting. It's prescribed for you, and so much of your thinking space and your time and energy is on all these the trappings, you know, like looking like...
Yeah, going back to the protective thing, it's in a way like it was assumed, I'm guessing, for the 2x2's, I think it was a bit like that in the Brethren, that you know, that role of protector, protecting your children, in a way, you farmed that out to your community. Like, it wasn't so much seen as your role as an individual, because it was very much seen as, oh, this is my community's job. Like, of course they'll be safe with those elders. They're like good and godly people, aren't they? Who are like, can be trusted to babysit my children, you know, like in a way that protective thing was farmed out to the wider community. But then that wider community just repeatedly was letting them down and was not protecting the children.
What do you do when you find out your children aren't safe, or you get an inkling that something isn't right?
Well, clearly to this point, I mean, these guys have been going for generations, and it's only in the last 2 or 3 years that all the mass sex abuse scandals have rolled over from, you know, Britain into Australia to New Zealand. So, good question. What did people do for 45 years? Well, Veronica and Lindsay spoke about.
Yeah, they did things like just put a chest of drawers in front of the door at night.
All those spoke up. And then what happened?
Nothing. So that's what I'm saying, is that if your ability to protect is so not developed, it's taken off you, it's shut down, then and you find yourself in a position where that instinct is activated, what are your options?
Well, you lose power, don't you?
You're so powerless. And she said something, Veronica said something at the end, which just really, I want to quote her because it was very powerful. She said, right at the end of the interview, love is an action. It sometimes looks like flipping tables and taking a whip and driving the baddies out.
Yeah.
When you are raised that anger is bad and love looks like never rocking the boat, it's really hard. But this is my loving.
Yeah.
I don't want people to suffer anymore. It's not just staying at home, reading the Bible and praying. It's an action. So things will not change unless we take action.
Yeah.
There, love is an action. It looks like flipping tables.
Yeah.
She's, of course, referencing Jesus in the temple when he goes in, he drives out the people selling pigeons and boats and stuff. And he's in there with his anger, flipping the tables. And she is identifying with that righteous indignators of Jesus and his anger towards those who are abusing this sacred space.
Yeah.
And it's chilling to hear her sort of
rise up. Yeah.
Yes, and being that now.
Yeah.
And the fact that her and Lindsay are literally the first woman 2x2's
in New Zealand.
In New Zealand that have sort of really come forward in a public way to speak. A lot of the newspaper articles have been incredible, that people were very early in their journey and hadn't felt like they could necessarily put their name to it. And we know we've got some men who've put their names out there, Tristan and Kyle and others, but these are the first sort of two women. It was quite a powerful opportunity to sit with these two women. It was a privilege. Thank you, ladies, to if anything we've done is assisted you to speak up and give you confidence, because we want other women to do that. Now think of that in the context of the Glorival women that have left. Actually, some of them have been the loudest champions of change. We've also had some great men stand up, but really, on the whole, majority, massive thumbs up to the women who've left, who've spoken up. Maybe think of something else. She talked about a table at another point, right towards the end as well. And she said, God took me away from a table of abusers. She's talking about the way that you sit around at a meal, and she was forced to sit around a table with these men, a table of abusers. And she said, but I'm still being accused by the people who sit at that table that I've left, God. And she's really flipping it around again, just to...
it's so helpful, because going back to things like power and protection and that then people like us, put myself in that category too, when you speak up, you get people from within these groups hurling abuse at you, and they hurl these narratives at you that you're bitter is a favourite phrase. It's used in a bunch of groups about former members that you're a bitter, you're apostate, you've left God, you don't love them. Definitely had that you wouldn't possibly speak up if you loved us. And yet it's actually like, no, think about the other way. We're doing this because we love you. We're doing this not out of bitterness or just an insane kind of out of control rage. We're doing it out of that righteous anger place. We're doing it because we find it abhorrent that some of these groups are still harbouring abusers and are still actually protecting the abusers, not the abused. That is why. And I just wish that some of those on the inside who hold to that narrative that we're just bitter, we're just angry, we're liars, that they could see that is not the case at all. It's coming from that place of love, and because we want to protect it from happening to others.
That's how you know these groups haven't changed. When you hear that kind of rhetoric from them, you know they haven't changed. I'm thinking just recently of the exposure of Glorival again in a series of newspaper articles about the suffocation. They call it the hand clamping, where the hand went over the mouth and pinch of the nose. It was designed. It was used on babies and toddlers, and designed to break the spirit, break the will, and hopeful didn't like hearing kids crying. But what he just wanted was perfect members, submission, obedient people. And so the parents were taught how to do it and why they should do it, and they felt this need to do it. I recall hearing someone sit in court testifying, and she had a child that was fussing. Well, they had 3 or 4 hour meetings, and she took her child out, and one of the shepherds of Glorivale went out there to her and basically told her that she needed to use the suffocation technique, and she really didn't want to. It's a really heartbreaking thing because women get pulled into doing things against their natural instinct. But the reason I brought it up is that Glorivale put out a statement. So Oranga Tamariki and police launched a mass allegation investigation over this issue, came out of the Royal Commission work, which was from leavers speaking up, by the way, not people still in Glorivale. And so about 60 reports of concern were put through to police and OT following on from the Royal Commission, and one of them, they launched this mass allegation, and they had I think 32 Oranga Tamariki workers go through the Glorivale leavers community and Glorivale and do interviews with the parents about this technique. And, out of all of that number, 2 people got formal warnings. 2 people. And one denied it. This came out from OIA's Official Information Act. One denied it. And then the other one obviously didn't. And then the community spokesperson said that, but none of them were in professional roles. And I'm like, that is a lie. Maybe at the time last year when they got their formal warning, they may not still have been, but I'm sorry, that's not true, because their early childhood teachers were doing this. It wasn't just parents. It was used as a technique with people to break the will of children before they got to 4, 5, 6, 7 months old, a year old, or 2 years old. So here they are still lying about it, which says to me
they haven't properly owned it.
Haven't properly owned it. They haven't properly
accountability
understood it, which means I don't trust them that they can recognise harm.
And coming back to what's that like for a mother, what's that like for the lioness with her young, who's actually socially required at cost to her own safety and the safety of her whole unit as a family to not do this extraordinarily harmful action. And just for our listeners, suffocation is illegal in New Zealand. It faces up to attempted suffocation, 7 years imprisonment. It's under the Crimes Act, a new law that came in, an amendment to the law in 2016. And you can end an individual's life within minutes. And just through this simple act.
Cause serious brain damage.
Serious brain damage, exactly. Yeah. And it is really, really serious. But to be taught that it is much less than what it is through a whole culture, to be they're required to do it, and the whole break the will of the child piece. Another way of looking at it is to teach the child, to teach the parent, to teach any onlookers that we can end your life whenever we need to.
Yeah.
That's what suffocation
We control
teaches.
your very breath.
We own your breath. That's right. We own your breath. That is what suffocation does. And so this is extraordinary. And to be the parent who not only cannot act to protect, to be the mother, That's what we're talking about here. We're talking about a woman's experience in a high control group, to participate in that harm and to be unable to protect your young.
Virginia Courage spoke and shared as part of the series that she recalls a father coming to her with a blue-purple limp child that was not breathing. Basically, he came out like, my child's not breathing, and she happened to be there and she resuscitated a child.
It's devastating, and we're going to learn more as time goes on, because this is right now in the news and in the courts. And
you know what? But to those in Glorivale, this series of news articles is really nothing to them. They're not going to lose any sleep over it.
It's just persecution, is it?
Well, this was years ago.
Yes, exactly.
That thing with Virginia, that sort of to that extent isn't happening anymore. Like they'll just rationalise that. Oh, we've had child protection. How did they say it? We've been implementing child protection policies since 2016, 2022. It was last year. And everything's always in the past and in the history with groups like this, but they're still not
actually safe.
No. So women then live with everything. They live with the moral injury of participating, and that's something we're going to be talking about in upcoming episodes, isn't it? can we segue into a really interesting part of the conversation? And they talked about the baby fundy voice.
Oh, yeah.
And where this particular group has its own sort of affectation, like an adaptation and a way of speaking inside this group. And the women, and they speak kind of like this.
And then they talk totally differently at home.
Yeah, like there's a cadence that these groups have. And it's about the uniformity that's required in these groups. And if you want to be seen as a good 2x2, you will pick up and take on the cadence and the speaking. And it's about the thoughts that are acceptable, the way of sharing them that are acceptable.
It's the gently, softly, inoffensive, childlike, infant loud, but take the sweet, pray and obey. Exactly. It's like harmlessness, can't offend anyone. You can take my thoughts or concerns if you want, but you don't have to. They're just small and little. It's like you're never showing up. Really, you're only just slightly slipping in the door if it's acceptable to everyone here for me to be here. You know, like how living like that.
It's incredible. It got me thinking about, just the different cultures really that exist. Cults have their own cultures, and they develop their own sort of
way of talking,
way of speaking and talking.
Yeah.
And I just thought that comes into it's not just the way they were speaking, but actually I've actually gone online because they mentioned Ted Harris, who does a takeoff of the 2x2 and how the elders speak. And I must say,
you mean?
it was quite well. It was, because when I listened to it, I'm like, oh wow. It's a different way of speaking than those in Glorabelle speak, but the content was incredible. And I started passing it around into people who are, who have left and others. And they were like, you won't believe it. We actually we used to sing that song too.
And they sing a hymn or something?
Yeah, he was talking about a hymn and he's,
you have to pop a link to it in the show notes.
Well, I think you better. But it reminded me it's not just the way you speak, it's what you say, and it's the interjects. And remember, interjects are those things that you've heard, quotes and comments and values and beliefs that you've heard so often that you just swallow them, they just go down without digesting, and you regurgitate them when the time is right, but you don't have faith, things are going bad, and out they come. So
So we want to kind of wrap this one up, I think. Is there any kind of final thoughts we might all want to leave our listeners and viewers with to wrap up these two extraordinary conversations with Veronica and Lindsay?
I think the spiritual abuse aspect of it is like, obviously with a group like 2x2's, it's totally woven in with it, as opposed to like a marketing group or anything like that might be also having certain impacts on the role of women. But I think when it's overlaid with people's spirituality, it just makes it so much more powerful and so much more difficult, I think, when you're told it's not just, do this because the group wants it or because men want it, but because God wants it.
Yes.
That just, or that, ultimately it's questioning your salvation or that kind of thing. That makes it incredibly sad, because it's just so powerful and really disrupts people's sense of self and sense of connection to the divine. And there's just so much to work through when they leave. So that aspect of it's really sad. But on the other hand, Veronica and Lindsay were so inspiring, and I'm sure many current as well as former 2x2's will be looking to people like them as they continue to unpack. I mean, they're such recent leavers, they're so early on in the journey of this life that they were essentially, born into and part of for multiple generations. They're so early on that journey of figuring out who they are and who they are as parents, as women, as partners, outside of the group. And it's inspiring to see their courage and tenacity. And I really look forward. I'd love to have them back in like a year's time or something and see how the journey's been unfolding for them, because it is a long journey, reintegration, rebuilding or building for the first time. It's
All right.
I agree. Incredible. Thanks, ladies. And thanks again to Veronica and Lindsay. I am sure you've inspired a generation to come of women leaving the 2x2's to speak up, and hopefully we gave you a safe place to do that. So thanks to our listeners for joining us today. We always like to thank Plains Media. It's so good to be here in studio together for this episode. Don't forget to head on to our social media platforms, like us, follow us, and listen up next time as we encourage you to cult-proof your life. Goodbye, everyone.
Ka kite anō.
See you next time.
If anything in today's episode was difficult or upsetting for you and you would like to talk to somebody, we encourage our New Zealand listeners to free call or text 1737 for support from a trained counsellor. Or you might like to visit the resources section of the Olive Leaf Network website, where you can find a range of organisations and resources that might be able to support you. We would also like to remind you that the views and thoughts and opinions that have been expressed in this program are the speakers alone, and Cult Chat does not necessarily endorse or share them.